I am here with the man, the myth, the legend, the Jeff Slack, one of my favorite people in the industry for a bunch of reasons, but mainly because you have this non-traditional approach to marketing, to brand building, and you've been able to leverage that to do incredible things with respect to Aston Martin F1. So give us a little background, how you got here, all your sports background that led you to where you are today.
Well, thanks, TJ. I feel the same way about you, man. So really pleasure to be here today. I've been doing this for a long time, about 30, 35 years in sports, and just been really lucky in my career. First job, somehow ended up working with Michael Jordan, David Falk.
Jeez.
And, that was really an incredible moment because Michael was really redefining sports marketing as it relates to being an athlete. There were a lot of challenges. I think there was racism. There was a lot of stuff. Magic hadn't really cracked it, and Michael cracked it. And it was just we learned a lot, and it was a hell of a journey, and MJ is just the best. So it started with that, and then really learning how the U.S. approaches the sports, not just marketing, but sports business. Yeah. Really working closely with the NBA, which, in my opinion, is probably the best marketed sport in the world, especially if you looked at what David Stern and where they brought that from. So took that kind of learnings and trying to apply it to international sports. Initially football, soccer for many years. I was the CEO of Inter Milan, ran IMG and some other things. And it was just, how do you make sports entertaining? How do you think about fan engagement and do things a little differently? So it's always been, for me, a bit of a challenge to apply certain principles, but into different sports. Helped launch the IPL cricket in India. You got to understand, this is central to a lot of people's life. I mean, go to a Liverpool game, man. I mean, this is what they live for. Go to cricket in India. And I've always found it fascinating, just the joy that people get from sports. And, you might like this sport or that sport, but it's just such a wonderful thing to be. So I've tried to apply that similar approach in the last 6 years at Aston Martin Formula One.
You've alluded to it. You've been able to extract from different sports properties, from different leagues, from different personalities, i.e. Michael Jordan or David Falk. And I've noticed as an observer that you've kind of sprinkled a bunch of ingredients from a lot of different experiences, a lot of different properties to build something special at Aston Martin F1 that doesn't feel like a racing brand. It feels like a global lifestyle brand. Can you talk about whether that was intentional or if it kind of happened organically?
Well, I guess it was intentional. We had a challenge, but an opportunity really to do something that you don't really see in sports, So I'm from Boston, so let me say the Red Sox. They've always been the Red Sox. That's the brand, the Red Sox. Well, we were a nothing brand. We were a team called Force India that Lawrence Stroll, our owner, bought out of bankruptcy, put a placeholder name in their Racing Point. But the genius that is Lawrence then ended up buying Aston Martin road cars, and we created a licensing group. So we were going from a nothing brand to Aston Martin. So you're going from something that really means nothing to people. There's no aspirations to one of the most aspirational brands in the world. At the time, it was really easy to think creatively because we were last in Formula One in terms of followers, if you just want to use social media metrics. We had this incredible brand that is very exclusive and, sell 4, 5, 6, 7,000 cars a year. Not a lot of people. So we had to say, hey, how do we take this very exclusive premium luxury brand, but also make it inclusive? And this was the funnest part. And I remember, our CMO, Rob Bloom, I went to Aston Martin and said, show us your focus. They hadn't even done focus groups. So we did a lot of focus groups, and we wanted to become the most inclusive, exclusive brand in the world. So and we've had so much fun with this because we've really broadened it out. Now, we always have to balance, we got to stay true to this brand, but it's been a hell of a ride and really exciting, and I think we've done, for instance, we first launched the car with the first time Aston Martin's coming back to Formula One for 61 years. Wow. And what we did for our car launch is the opening scene was Dave, the rapper.
The rapper, I love that.
Now, no one would have thought about that a couple of years before.
Yeah.
But and he's still with us. He was just in Monaco. That was in 2021. So, but he really fit it. So that's what's been great, TJ, and we've had ownership and other people that lean into that. So we're just lucky. We had this incredible brand, but also this moment where we were nowhere. So you had to think about and do things differently. I think the other part of the advantage is I'm not an F1 guy, and just like I really wasn't a soccer guy, you can come into things with a different view. Formula One is this incredible circus that travels the world, but it's like a bubble. It's called a bubble because there's a guy at our team who's done 600 races, man. This is what he knows.
Wow,
but when you're like that, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to think a little differently. So I think we had a bit of an advantage on some of the other teams who are all amazing organizations, but maybe weren't being as aggressive or thinking differently about how do you make this a more inclusive sport, and that's how we really set out to do it.
You mentioned inclusivity a bunch, but another key theme I'm hearing from you is innovation, because you're like, how do we do this differently? How do we reach new audiences? How do we disrupt? One of the things that I'd love to see is, you mentioned Dave, we've talked about Tim's ad nauseum. You even leaned into a partnership with TikTok to democratize access to Aston Martin F1, which is quite literally providing inclusivity to people who typically may not have had that vantage point. Has that been difficult given that it isn't as common across F1? Is that a fair question?
It hasn't been difficult at all. And I literally had a lunch today, and I was seated next to the CEO of TikTok. And listen, I'm not a big social media person in terms of posting, following, but I'll never forget, and I'm not trying to take credit for this because at the end of the day I didn't have a lot to do with it, but in 2020 when I joined, we didn't have a videographer. As I said, we were last, so we had nothing.
Jeff.
And I said to we were 5 people at the time. I said, what about TikTok? And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. The next year we hired a woman with a lot of brand marketing experience, established a partnership with TikTok, and so for 4 years now we've had this unbelievable relationship. For instance, Fernando Alonso went from 0 to over 1 million in just a span of a few months. He had that fun thing when people thought Taylor Swift was he and Davey, and he played with that. So our admin people are really good. So we've really leaned into that, and now, of course, it's so important. I wouldn't say it's as important as a live broadcast, but all this stuff going on now in TikTok and how fans are engaging and being able to participate in the sport, and in our case, to a brand that, they're not probably going to buy the car, but they can touch and feel it through things like TikTok. So, and we've hired great people, really empowered them to do that. So that's been a fundamental element to our relationship. And I never went into it from a money standpoint. I went into it from a marketing standpoint, TJ. Formula One, normally these things are all about money. How much are you going to pay me? We have to make money. That's how we go racing. But we also have a longer-term fan development program, which I think ultimately is the real value of the team, is how many people follow you, how many support you. So it's a dual track. But again, in sports, I think often owners, people that think about money, don't look at those long-term marketing advantages. So TikTok has been one of the best things we've ever done.
We've been talking for several minutes now. The first time you mentioned commercial, which is a pretty big part of your job. But what I think that signifies is the fact that you recognize it's a flywheel. Marketing, TikTok, exposure, reach, audience drives commercial opportunities. So how have your brand relationships benefited from the fact that you all have leaned into marketing so heavily?
Well, look, marketeers today are under pressure wherever they got to deliver. They have jobs, right? And Formula One's an expensive sport to be involved with. So we need to provide them with an ROI. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business. And what are these things that I just talked about do? They provide an ROI. So I mentioned we were in 2020, the team with the fewest followers. We're now the 5th follow team. And we haven't, frankly, had as much success on the track as we would like. We hope that that's going to come in the future. We're the #1 team in terms of engagement per follower and the fastest growing team. And none of that's been done through paid or anything like that. That's all organic. So that does have an impact on our partners, because all of a sudden we have a lot of partners who love activating through TikTok, and the fact that we're doing all this fan creation projects with TikTok is something that they benefit from. So it's just another way that we can not only build a fan base and make our fans feel engaged in touching our organization, but also for our partners to give them another distribution in place of TikTok, which is enormous and growing.
I want to double click on your partnership relationships. I've had the luxury of observing how you engage your partners. It's top tier, and you really address it from a white glove perspective. Can you walk through the strategy of how you think about partnership and why your commercial relationships are so strong?
Sure. I think there's 2 elements to it. The first is the business element. Having run different sports teams, when you run a sports team as a CEO, you look at your revenue streams, and you're going to have your gate You're going to have your TV money. You're going to have sponsorship, some licensing, maybe some other stuff. And it's going to be a diverse group of revenue streams. We have two forms of revenue. We have what we get from Formula One centrally, which is really based on where you finished the year before, and we have partnerships. And in our case, partnerships is going to be 2/3 to 70% of our revenue. So if we don't do this well, we don't exist. In fact, I tell people, not only do I not have a gate, but I spend $27 million a year buying Paddock Club tickets from Formula One. So cost me to have people at races. So that's one. There's a business reason. Second, culturally, we have tried to foster and engender a culture of partnership where we start with the answer is yes. And so, I really hard pressed to think of times we've said no to things that our partners wanted to do. We're not dogmatic. We don't look at the contract. So there's so that one is the business need, and the second is the ethos of the organization. And that's not based on how much money you spend with us. That's based on being great partners. So I think that's really come through and been one of the reasons why I think the last 5 years we've probably grown faster as a revenue multiple than any sports team in history. I mean, I'm hard to think of a team that's grown that fast.
Incredible. I want to lean into a specific example, Aramco. You've worked with them for years. They've come back. The partnership has continued to progress. Why do you think that partnership has worked so well, and what is a responsibility that you feel to continue to deliver for them? Because you do.
Well, you feel a huge responsibility because these people are really, one, they're spending a lot of money with you, and two, they're trusting you. They're going to do what you say you're going to do. So Aramco is an incredible company. Obviously, it's the backbone of the Saudi economy. But for many years, its marketing strategy was to say nothing and be as quiet as possible. And then they went public and realized they needed to talk to the world. They were being defined in certain ways. And so then they started an outreach. But it was a little bit, pulling them into the modern world. And you got a bunch of petroleum engineers, and that's their focus. And they're not really marketeers or communications people. So it started with that. We started with them in 2022. They're now our title sponsor of the team, and we've extended through 2028. Most importantly, in the new regulations in 2026, all of the fuels are sustainable fuels and lubes. So there's zero carbon footprint in the making of these fuels and lubes from 2026. And Aramco is the best in the world at that. They'll be in our engines for next year. So that's really where we're trying to get to. So we've done some incredible things. We had one of our reserve drivers, Jessica Hawkins, who's of her own an amazing lady, be the first woman ever to drive a modern ground effects car, and she drove that in Riyadh Boulevard in Saudi Arabia, which 10 years or so ago a woman wasn't even allowed to drive. And here's this beautiful lady, supremely talented racing car driver driving down that. And there were girls who saw that, and when she got out of the car, cried when they seen the Saudi lady. So those are, we did that in conjunction with Aramco. So when you do things like that, it's beyond business. It really makes you feel good that you're setting a good example for people, and you're doing some fun things.
That was such an iconic moment. We can't leave without talking about AI, artificial intelligence. You all have really started to toy around with some cool things. AI Lonzo was something that I saw that was really interesting, and you've given your team the keys to try, break shit. Let's figure out what works, what doesn't work, and we learn. Walk us through that approach.
Sure. Well, AI Alonso is something we're really proud about. Through some friends in Silicon Valley, got introduced to a company called 11 Labs. It's one of the leading AI voice businesses, and we combined that with another company, Real Networks in UK, that does the video. Because we have to go to our drivers who are flying around the world doing 24 races. It's a really demanding job all the time for help in our commercial program. And we said, let's just try this. So we went to Fernando. He thought it was a good idea. And we did a deal with 11. And now we have an avatar, Fernando. Avatar speaks, I think it's 37 different languages. And, we weren't sure how it was going to be received, because the flip side is, AI, it's about being authentic. But so far, it's been really great, and it's been great. Fernando's enjoyed it, and we make sure people know. So this is an authentic AI from Fernando. So there was a bunch of issues associated with it that we had to, but as you rightly say, the whole idea is to try stuff.
That's right.
And if it doesn't work, we'll step back. But at least we're trying and doing things differently. So that's on the marketing creative side, and all the presentation, decks, research. We're really using AI a lot. Then on the racing team side, to me, this is a Moneyball moment. Formula One is a sport based on technology, And AI, there's no sport in the world where AI can make a big difference. We're all about data analysis, correlation between what we see in CFD, the wind tunnel, and the track. So AI is an enormous part of our future. We have some of the greatest tech companies in the world as our partners. So if we get more into the technical element of it, this sport is all going to be about AI.
Can't talk about the future without obviously talking about AI, but you all have made a really key addition to the team that we all believe is going to impact performance in the best way. Talk to us about the future of Aston Martin F1 on the track.
Well, we're here to win, and in Formula One that takes 7, 8, 9 years, and we've been out as Aston Martin now 5 years. Our competitors are really, really good. They've been doing it for a long time. To win in Formula One, it's just not enough to, I don't know, if you got an NBA team to put out even 8 or 9 great players on 12. Here you gotta have a factory that works, that you can build the cars in, which we didn't. Have your own wind tunnel, which we did not. You've got to have your own works engine, which we'll have next year in terms of Honda. And there's maybe 50 people in the world that really move the needle in terms of cars and car designs. The number one guy is a guy named Adrian Newey. He's won 26 world championships. He was the architect of Williams, McLaren, and most recently Red Bull, winning, I think, 14 world championships for Red Bull. He's now in our factory, drawn his hand-drawn famous drawings and focused totally on 2026 cars. So we're very optimistic about the future. You have to be a bit patient. You got to invest some money, but it's going to be a fun ride.
There you go. Jeff, always a pleasure chatting with you, man. So excited to call you a partner, a friend, and really pumped to see the future of Aston Martin F1, man.
Oh, thank you, TJ. I really enjoyed it.
Good stuff.